Welcome into the weekend warm-up presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by my Action Network co-host Duck. Every Friday, we're coming to you live, giving all of our final additions to our card, taking into account all the latest market movement, injury reports, weather forecasts to help you stay ahead of the action. And since we are live, we are taking questions along the way from our audience, so you can submit your questions right here in the YouTube chat or hit us up on the Action Network Discord, or you can tag Duck or myself over on X. We're going to be periodically checking those out along the way in the next 45 minutes to an hour. Before we get into the bets, the projections, the latest news, there's a quick and easy way for you to tail everything that you hear in this live show. First, sign up for Action Pro. You'll get instant notifications when any Action Network expert, that means Colin Wilson, Stuckey, Duck, myself, whenever any of us log something in the app, you're going to get that right away. So you're going to get the best bets at the best prices. Plus, you can access our pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and his predictive analytics team and a ton of other benefits. And right now, a special offer is still out there this fall. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro and get $20 off the annual price of Action Pro when you use the promo code BBOC20. So don't miss out on the best bets at the best prices. Visit actionnetwork.com/pro and use promo code BBOC20 to get $20 off a year of Action Pro. All right, Duck, let's hop right into it. We got a Big Ten matchup here on Friday night. We had plenty to discuss on Saturday. There's been a ton of steam in the market. Walk us through your steam report, what you're seeing, and if it's made any impacts or you're throwing anything new on your card because of these moving lines.
Well, the one that's really puzzling to me is TCU getting steamed down to 3.5. This line opened 5.5, 6 at some shops and has been bet down pretty consistently throughout the week. And I just don't understand the move. Listen, I don't want to penalize BYU so significantly for what they did on the road against Texas Tech. We talked about it on the live show last week. We were all pretty well in lockstep that, listen, this BYU team has benefited from some good fortune. They're not as talented as Texas Tech. Texas Tech's legitimately a top five, top seven defense in the entire country. We just knew that they were going to show up and play hard, but it wasn't going to go well. And I think every one of us won our wagers on the live show talking about BYU at Texas Tech. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. BYU now comes home. We get the night game in Provo. They're going to get the voodoo rocking. And we're trying to now ascertain how they're going to perform against a TCU team that has just played so many just slog games now. You look at all these games that they've not looked right, in my opinion, since they lost to Arizona State. Sluggish against Colorado, tied at 21 with 6 minutes to go. They did win and cover, but really sluggish game there. Blasted by Kansas State to kind of start the Wildcat springboard. You win a squeaker against Baylor. Major trouble against West Virginia, losing to Iowa State last week, and now they got to go to BYU. I just think the Cougs are equipped here to have much more success against TCU's defense than they did last week against Texas Tech. TCU defensively 112th in finishing drives, 124th in explosiveness allowed, and TCU's been kicking a lot of field goals in the red zone. That could cost them here. The other thing about this, we'll touch on this when we get to the weather report, it's going to be bitch cold in Provo. I mean, who's going to go out there for TCU and line up and tackle those BYU running backs when it's 12 degrees and you're down by 14 in the second half? I just don't see it. I think BYU, this is a great spot for BYU to get right.
As I mentioned, live questions along the way. One has already come in on the YouTube chat from Mr. Gerg. Duck, what would you play NCCU up to tonight? The best I can get right now is NCCU laying a touchdown. He wants to know at least your guardrails for a bet like this at the FCS level.
Yeah, and that was one I wrote up and I put it in. I think if you shop around, you might be able to pluck a 6.5, and I'd be much more comfortable with it there. I do see at least two books that are generally available to the public where you can pluck a 6.5. I think our friends over at DK have a 7 flat, but go find the 6.5. That's the better bet. Go lay 6.5 someplace else.
All right, let's keep going with your Steam report. Talk to me about Air Force and their movement.
Well, yeah, and it's been really crazy. You look at UConn and they played absolutely out of their minds last week, defeating um, Duke, and they've had three play-up spots this season against ACC competition and played really well in every single one of those games. They had a close loss against Syracuse in a game they controlled for about 55 minutes. They defeated Boston College, and then they defeated Duke. Well, what's happened after those games? After they lost to Syracuse, Syracuse beat them twice because they went out and lost to Delaware. And then after Boston College, they go out and lose on the field against Rice. And I think it's kind of a hangover spot for a team that's really accustomed to playing up or playing down to their competition. But pertaining to the movement, we saw Air Force open at an absurd number. It was like 11 and a half or 12, quickly bet to 8.5. It's gone down throughout the week, got all the way down to 6 or 6.5 before kind of settling at 7 here. You can see 6.5 at some places, 7, 7.5 at some places. Get the right side of the number here, but I think Air Force is really live to win this game. And I think people are going to be turned off from Air Force because their pass defense is so porous. And we have Joey Fagnano, who's been an exquisite player from the FCS level at Maine, who comes into here to UConn, no interceptions, 25 touchdowns, throwing the ball all over the field. But UConn's defense is not set up to get stops. So I think this is one where Air Force is going to be able to outpossess UConn, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, get successful plays on second and third down to set them up if they have to go fourth and short. And this is the point of the season last year where Air Force really springboarded the momentum. I think with what they have left on the schedule, they can make a bowl game. I think this is a real focus spot for Air Force. Be interesting to see how UConn shows up, but I think this line is too high and the market's agreed all week.
All right, there's been a major roller coaster out of the SEC in terms of line movement, and that is Ole Miss and Florida. At one point, just looking here at the Action Network app, -7.5. Then it was in the 16-point range. Now it's at 11.5 with Ole Miss laying it. Do you think this is just, services putting out plays, that having the reaction, maybe some false indicators in the market, some injury reports? We know that Lane likes to play a little bit of, gamesmanship when it comes to hiding exactly what's going on with his roster in terms of availability. That shell game being said, do you think there's any validity to this much movement? It's been a true roller coaster throughout the week. And where do you come down on this game between the Gators and the Rebs?
Well, it's unique that we're this deep into the season and we're getting this much volatility in the line. I think when you look at the opener, it was so significantly too low, and a lot of the sharp early bettors recognized that and pounded Ole Miss. Maybe it got too high at 16 and a half. I didn't never see it touch 17, but maybe at 16 and a half it was too high. I don't know, under 13 and a half, I kind of think this is go time on Ole Miss. I think a real big motivational factor here for Mississippi is that last year they had a chance to really stamp their ticket to the playoff. Now they lost to Florida on the road 24 to 17 in a game they were about this type of point spread favorite in. And this was one that I think Lane is absolutely going to remember. We're not in a situation where Ole Miss can just play with their food like they have against Washington State or the Citadel, where it really doesn't matter what the product looks like because they're going to win the game anyway. I think this is put the hammer down. Remember that spot last year where the Florida Gators ruined your season. I think that they still want to win impressively just to reaffirm and re-solidify their positioning with the committee. Maybe they're playing for seeding. And with Florida, we've talked about this quite often at BBOC here, where there's been certain spots for the Gators where they play up. The defense has been at least B plus level all season. The defense is pretty well talented. The offense hit or miss. But we saw that spot against Texas at home a mile away, where it was just an absolute play on spot for Florida in the swamp, Texas on the road. We sniffed it out a mile away. We saw the Georgia spot when they were catching 7 in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, and we all kind of thought, man, maybe it's too many points. I kind of think the play on spot for Florida could potentially be next week and also when they host the Knowles. I think those are the two play on spots. I don't think this is going to go real well. I think you have Lane Kiffin rallying these troops and saying, hey, I want to pound these guys into the ground. Remember what they did to us last year? I think they leave no doubt. I think they cover the number. If you're getting under 2 touchdowns, I think it's go time on Mississippi.
Time to keep interacting with our chat here from Andrew Clark. Fignano at some point has to regress, right? I don't necessarily think that's true. I think he may just end the season 40 touchdowns, no picks. That being said, I still like the Air Force side because I think there's ways to take advantage of this UConn defense. And as I mentioned on the Tuesday show, they played down to Ball State earlier in the year. Lucky to get out of that game with a win. Didn't come close to covering, only win by 6 points in a spot like that against a team that's kind of a service academy offense in MAC clothing. In this case, Air Force has lots of flexibility in terms of what they run out of the flex bone, and then when they go pistol shotgun to be able to test this UConn defense. So I think it'll be a high scoring game. I would prefer to have the points there. His other comment has to do with the Buffalo Bulls. Four lost fumbles, or no, four fumbles, three of them lost. There was also another fumble that got overturned. Like, what do you want me to say? You can't win any games in college football. You certainly can't cover any numbers when you're turning the ball over 4 and 5 times. And it seems like every time that I played him this year, they've just decided to give the ball away in mass. So you add in the quarterback injuries. I mean, two defensive touchdowns. Like, yes, I should have just taken my one win on that Bowling Green game, put it in my pocket, and then gone on to next year with the Bulls. But there's times when I'm frustrated with my reads, and then there's times where a team just turns it over 5 times. There's nothing you can do in situations like that when you get that sloppy with the football. But yes, they are in podcast prison for the rest of the year. Question from BK. Any thoughts on South Florida and Navy? I'm going to get into some more of the injury looks ahead of time, but it looks as though Horvath is trending towards playing in this game. Huge difference. This team is drawing dead without him. They need to score probably 35 points to be able to hang around in this game with a South Florida team that I think is going to shred the midshipman defense. But with Horvath at the helm and potentially healthy, I know he has some upper body injuries. He's been dinged up. I think taking them on the points, that's where I'm leaning right now. I want to get 100% confirmation that he's going to play, so I'm going to wait to punch anything in on the app until Saturday morning when we get that availability report, and at least when we see him warming up. What are your thoughts between the Goats and the Bulls here, Duck?
I mean, I tend to think it's too many points. We saw Navy play real spirited football in the first half against Notre Dame. We're really right in there. Had a chance to make it a real tight game in the third quarter. They couldn't take the opening possession and do much with it. And then you go touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, touchdown, and then that's all it was. But this is a different animal here, and I think that you get the middies at home where they generally play really good football. And while they still have a lot of work to do, you look at what's going on with Memphis and how Memphis has played historically against the middies. And this path for Navy to maybe do something creative to get their name in the hat there for the conference championship all of a sudden looks a lot more realistic for them if they win this game. I wonder how this is going to go here for South Florida. You're on the road. It's unfortunate it's not going to be very cold. I think it's going to be about 48 degrees at kickoff. If it was going to be one of those real windy and cold games, I think that would significantly impact South Florida much more than it would be the Navy squad. But I still kind of think that you look at some of these Navy performances the last couple of weeks, and while the final scores show that they didn't play very well, you look into the box and it actually really wasn't that bad. They had so many chances against North Texas. The red zone turnovers, being stopped on downs, it was just things where situational execution cost them. And at some point that could start to even out, and this could be the defense that it could even out for. I think Navy intentionally plays keep away. I think they play slow possession. I think they run the ball a ton with Tesca. I think if Horvath is in, it's a real game changer. And you're getting 10 and a half. I like Navy this week.
Now, a few things came in from Twitter, a little clarification on the weather in Provo. It's actually going to be upper 40s, potentially rainy. So I've done a whole season with you now, Duck. I believe bitch cold is 10 degrees or colder, butt cold is 32 degrees to 10 degrees. I think that's the right duck thermometer in terms of what I'm looking at. Does that change your thought at all about a slow first half for TCU if it is closer to 50 degrees before the rain sets in? Or is this more so a situational spot where you think BYU gets right?
I think BYU gets right either way, but I think, yeah, I don't think it's enough points with BYU in that environment. They are as ironclad as you can be at home. This is a spot where I really like them. I'm gonna have to check my weather forecast because I thought it was gonna be a little bit colder at kickoff.
All right, let's jump to more from your Steam report. La Tech and Wazoo, this number is just getting bet down in terms of the total. Open near 48. Now it's 43 and a half out in the market. Is there anything driving this from an injury perspective, or do you think this is just two defenses that are probably going to win the day here?
It appears that way. I still don't think Louisiana Tech's defense is too terribly bad, and it was just interesting how they're going to show up in this spot off of the heartbreaking loss last week. And I'm kind of inclined to think that they will at least show up. I mean, this team is 5-4. You're trying to make a bowl game. Nothing's assured with Liberty and Missouri State left on the slate here, so kind of a different situation than when Toledo went out there, where Toledo was already bowl eligible. We already kind of knew what their season was going to be. It doesn't have any impact in the conference standings, but I still think Louisiana Tech wants to try to make a bowl game. So I think they show up. But the major indicator here is that their quarterback is out, Baker, and he's not going to play in this one. So it's going to be really tough for Louisiana Tech to do much through the air. They were already inconsistent offensively throwing the ball, so it's going to be a ground attack for them. Wazoo just has not really done a tremendous amount offensively to make me think that they're going to A, win this game with margin, or B, completely light up the scoreboard. No matter who they play. I mean, 7 points against Oregon State their last time out. Now they are off the bye, which could possibly have them a little bit more refocused here. Must win for Wazoo to make a bowl game because they're not winning next week. So you got to win this one to keep the bowl game in play. And they've just shown such a propensity with Jimmy Rogers to get a lead in the second half and just slow grind these games out. We don't see a lot of big plays. We don't see a lot of risk taken. They're completely comfortable punting on fourth and short and playing the field position game. So yeah, I agree with the move here. I think this is an under game.
I'm going to run through some of the weather report here from games that will not be impacted that we thought at least earlier in the week potentially some wind had a chance to move things around. Kansas State and Oklahoma State, nothing crazy as I just mentioned from a wind perspective. It's actually going to be a perfect fall day in the low 70s, sunny. Then you go to Lubbock for Texas Tech, Central Florida. And it's shocking that the wind isn't an issue here because, generally speaking, at this time of year in November, it's something you always have to consider with a Texas Tech home game, but it's going to be the single digits. The issue really is going to be the heat. It's going to be in the upper 80s, which means that field temps are going to hit 90 in this game. So look potentially for a Central Florida defense to get a bit gassed in the second half. Then things get a little blustier. I'm not sure that's a word. Gets a little bit windier. Illinois against Maryland, the wind is going to be right on that danger line of 15 miles per hour. So in terms of the passing game having an impact there, if you're counting on that for an over, it may be a time to reconsider. And then we look at one that is really going to be impacted out of the MAC, and that's sustained winds in the 18 mile per hour range between Ball State and Eastern Michigan. Real issues for the passing game. Not as much for Ball State because they'd be happy to just run the ball and to keep things from a ground and pound perspective. Going to take a pause here for a moment, take some more questions here from the YouTube audience. Thoughts on Virginia Duke? Duck, do you think the market has just moved a little bit too much in terms of the hate for Virginia? I know that they've been lucky. They pulled a bunch of rabbits out of their hat this year. But at this point, do you think them catching points against the Blue Devils is too much of a market overcorrection?
Well, I mean, the wind is kind of out of the sails, and I'll admit it was kind of a little bit of hyperbole used on my part. I had the 200 to 1 ticket for them to win the ACC. We've talked about them having been a team of destiny all year. A lot of that was tongue in cheek. I didn't necessarily know if this team was really the best team in the conference. And now, I mean, the real question is Chandler Morris is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Is he going to be able to effectively operate the offense? Because he's really the ticket to the ride, and he's really the guy who has done well to make Virginia's offense what it is this season. It was
And also, according to Pete Thamel, at least from ESPN, he's trending towards playing. He hasn't got the probable tag just yet, but that report at least would indicate that he's going to give it a go. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be at 100% and that they're not going to have a secondary option behind him going into the game, but just somebody to consider when you're talking about the Wahoos.
Yeah, and if he is a go and if he's effective, I think they can do a little bit of damage against this porous Duke defense that really struggles to stop anybody. But Duke has played a lot better in recent at home. I don't know, I don't know what their mindset was when they were playing Connecticut because it was a game that really didn't matter. I would be inclined to think Duke could probably win this game. But it's a real strength on strength here because you've got Duke's offense, which is electric, which can score from anywhere on the field, against Virginia's defense, which has really stepped up all season. That's their head coach's calling card, is defense, and they've really been improved in year one. I, I kind of think it's an under game. I kind of think it's one of those games where the Wahoos show up defensively and can force a few things on Duke, make them kick a few field goals. Maybe they go for it on fourth down and don't get it. But I'm still not 100% positive that this Virginia offense is going to do a ton to light it up. So team total under 24 and a half, 25 and a half. I might look that way for Virginia.
One game that is going to be impacted heavily due to the win, at least in the first 30 minutes of game action, is Middle Tennessee against Western Kentucky. It's going to be gusty to start, winds in the 25 mile per hour range, but they're going to calm down considerably in the second half. We'd like to identify these as early as we can in the week. This is a live play second half opportunity. When the wind tails off, these teams could start putting the ball in the air in the second half and potentially score a bit more. So if you get a number that is on a considerable discount because of the weather, and then the weather's just not there in the second half, that's an opportunity to smash. Going to look at some more injuries here. Matt Zenitz of CBS Sports reporting that Hollywood Smothers and Justin Jolly are likely to give it a go against the Miami Hurricanes. That's enough for me. I'm going to take them. I'm going to add them to my card plus 15 and a half. You look at their high end play this year, they get wins over Virginia and Georgia Tech. And when they don't play well and when they're not healthy, they get boat raced. So this is going to be one of those bets where I wouldn't be surprised if I'm on the right side of this, that they almost win this game outright. And if they don't show up and they come out flat, they could lose this by 35. I wouldn't be surprised. But with those two superstars in terms of the run game and the passing game there, Smothers is one of the best players in the entire country when he's healthy. He's not been healthy all that much this season. He wasn't a walking boot about 2 weeks ago. So I take it, that he's not going to be 100% on this one, but he's a gamer. He's going to give it a go by all indications. So I'll take the 15 and a half against the Miami Hurricanes team that you look in recent weeks when they played good teams. They've lost. They've lost to Louisville. They lost to SMU. Yes, they've beaten the toothpaste out of the tube when it comes to playing Syracuse, playing some of these little sisters of the poor in the ACC. The ACC is just not a good conference top to bottom. So I would not, overreact to some of that fool's gold of them, quote unquote, being back. I think it's just a matter of the competition. I think NC State is one of those high variance teams. It's like a college basketball team that's going to shoot 35 threes. If they make 15 of them, they could beat any team in the country. If they shoot 20% from three, they're going to lose. This is the situation with the Wolfpack, and at least I'm getting them from a starting 22 perspective with some of their best players on the field. What are your thoughts between the Canes and the Wolfpack here, Duck?
Well, I think if you do like North Carolina State, you have to like the over because I just really hard for me to put any stock in that North Carolina State defense being able to procure any stops. I think when you look at Miami, their point total is about 35, and it's hard to imagine anything less than that based on the on-field performance of North Carolina State in their last three games against FBS competition. It's hard to think about this because this is Miami's last home game. It's senior day. They're going to have a little pomp and circumstance surrounding that. While it's very unlikely, I guess they're still not mathematically eliminated from ACC contention. So there's a chance that maybe they're a motivated bunch here. I think that the real tricky spots for Miami are going to come in the next couple of weeks when they got to go to Blacksburg and then they got to go to Pitt in the finale. Could be real chilly and cold up there. And if they're not playing for anything, ooh, that could be a real bad one. I haven't gotten to the window on this one, but I think if you like NC State and you think that they can put enough points on the board to keep it within this number, you probably have to also maybe consider looking at the over.
Memphis, I feel like we've been talking about Lewis for weeks now. He's got that injury to his ankle. They continue to treat it. He's not practicing with the ones. Even if he goes here, there's a high likelihood of a flare up in game. We saw it in the last one against Tulane. That was a game that they could have won late if he was on the field leading the final drive, but he wasn't. So, is this the kind of injury where whether he's a go or not, Memphis becomes a non-starter because of the likelihood of him not finishing a game for the Tigers?
Yeah, and to answer that question, I've been very, very impressed with East Carolina over the majority of the season and had every opportunity possible to not only win the NC State game in the opener, but also win at Tulane on the road, which would have put them firmly in control of their own destiny in the American Conference. But this team has done what they needed to do against inferior foes. My concern for East Carolina here would be they play at a blazing speed. But they're not overly efficient. I don't know specifically how effective the run game is going to be against Memphis. And ECU has struggled in pass protection this season. And you look at Memphis's defensive front, which has been better at getting pressure to the quarterback. So I think Memphis's defense can keep them in this game. It's been the problem now for a couple of seasons for the Pirates, but their red zone inefficiency has just been absolutely atrocious. 47 red zone possessions this year for ECU, and 20 times they did not score a touchdown in those. 10 times they were turned away, 10 times they kicked field goals. So there's not a lot of real stock that you can put in East Carolina cashing in for seven. East Carolina has improved this season over expectations because of the play of their defense. They've been very, very solid defensively in limiting explosive pass plays and stuffing the run. And Brendan Lewis was just such a part of the run game for Memphis. When that ground attack got humming with DeRozier and Sutton Smith, well, a part of that element was Brendan Lewis running the ball. He had 500 rushing yards before he got hurt. And without him in there, I just kind of feel like the ground attack might be a little bit quarantined. ECU can put their fingerprint on what Memphis wants to do offensively. This is kind of a real gross one because you'd think when these two get together, it's going to be a high-flying affair with a bunch of points, but I kind of like the under in this one.
Speaking of quarterback injuries, let's talk Boise State, San Diego State that has massive impact in the Mountain West Conference title race. All of a sudden, if San Diego State loses, could Hawaii sneak in there? There's going to be lots of interested parties outside of just the Broncos and the Aztecs. But Boise State's going to be starting Cutforth at quarterback, and the Idaho native looked bad. Like he came in, he was overwhelmed. Two picks against Fresno, three sacks, sub 50% completion percentage. Now he's in his first career start against the San Diego State defense that before the Hawaii game, which I'm not saying you can throw it out, it's a statistical outlier, it still counts. But everything went wrong in a weird road trip. I mean, weird things have happened on the island before. And Denegal gave it a go, but he clearly wasn't himself. He wasn't 100%. I think they would have been better off if they had just built an entire game plan around Burt Emanuel Jr. running the football. They didn't opt to go in that direction. Is he a little bit healthier? And the fact is, this line movement, it just doesn't jive with me in terms of the drop off at quarterback play for the Broncos. Do you see that in the same way? Do you think the Aztecs are the only side that you could play in a game like this?
I do, and it was disappointing last week, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say I was wrong on Hawaii this season, and I was specifically wrong on the Bows since they've had their full arsenal of receivers. And halfway through this season, after Alejado came back from the foot injury, we've seen this offense turn the corner. It took several years for Timmy Chang to really get the run and shoot offense humming. It hadn't under Shagger, and it really hadn't for several games this season. But this offense for Hawaii has really turned the corner. And you're absolutely right. A loss for San Diego State opens up the door for Hawaii. It opens up the door for New Mexico. It opens up the door for UNLV to possibly get back into the race. If San Diego State wins, it's hard to imagine where they don't at least get into the game. Uh, the quarterback drop off is significant. It's akin to what we saw with Troy when Goose went out and it was Kilcrease who went in against Memphis and they couldn't complete a pass, couldn't get a first down. It was that level of bad against Fresno State. Well, they're off the bye week. They have a little bit of time now to try to get a game plan together. It's hard to see how it's going to look without him getting into the line of fire and being able to do it. But I would just be inclined to think that Boise is really going to struggle offensively here. San Diego State has played absolutely lights out at home. In totality of their season for San Diego State, they've looked really, really good throughout. It was a bad performance last week. Uh, I think they kind of get right here at home, and I don't know if Boise State's going to put the fear into everyone. Not only is the quarterback out, but two of their receivers are out too, so they're shorthanded. They got a couple of weapons that they're down on the offensive skill positions. I don't know how many points they score. I'm thinking Boise State team total under 17 and a half or full game under 42.
All right, let's turn to the Friday night game out of the Big Ten I mentioned at the top. Oregon's a bit banged up in the skill position room. Sadiq and Moore. Moore looks like he's going to be out again with that knee injury that he tweaked in practice about 2 weeks ago. Sadiq on the other side is questionable. Maybe he'll give it a go. Probably going to come down to how he reacts in warmups. But let me zoom out here. They're a huge favorite. Everyone's just assuming, even with those guys on the shelf, that the Ducks get the win. Because when you look at Minnesota this year, they've won the games that they're supposed to win. They're 6-3, but they've absolutely got pounded by the better teams on their schedule. Ohio State and Iowa, they were both laughers. However, if PJ Fleck were to pull off a win like this is the kind of game that absolutely catapults him really into the coaching carousel and probably gets a better job in this offseason with so many jobs open. There's so many dominoes that are going to fall in this offseason. This is the kind of life-defining win that could absolutely change, the whole row the boat village in one fell swoop. Is there any chance, can you consider any game script in which this is a game in the fourth quarter and the pressure starts sliding to a Ducks team who, have not been perfect? And as I mentioned, they're not playing with a full deck in this game. Is there any way for Minnesota to pull the upset here as a 25-point dog?
Well, on the road this season, they've played quite poorly. 3-41 against Iowa, 3-42 against Ohio State, and lost by two touchdowns at California. And they had a 5% post-game win expectancy in their last time out at home against Michigan State in a game they had no business winning. They just don't stack enough successful plays together offensively to move the ball and to put enough points on the board. And that's really unfortunate because I think the defense is actually pretty solid. Oregon, their major showdown spot is next week when they got USC coming in. So there's a chance, you got the Iowa win, which was a big win, a gritty win. They really struggled in that game at times. It was, weather aided and whatever else. Iowa kickers sniping 58-yard field goals in the elements. Um, there's a chance that there's a little bit of a look ahead, especially with the fact that Oregon's not fully equipped with all of their offensive talent. Minnesota did really well against Nebraska in getting to the backfield. They had 9 sacks. They just frustrated the Nebraska offensive line and Dylan Raiola. Nebraska didn't score a touchdown in that game. So the path would be you play your ass off in the front seven, you get to the backfield, you get Oregon in third and long, you get off the field, you maybe try and find a way to possess the football. Wisconsin did some of those things too, where they were able to frustrate the Ducks. They were able to possess the ball a little bit. They didn't move it a ton, but kept that game really competitive. There's a path. There's a lot of roads that this leads down, and there's probably one that leads to a 6-point game in the fourth quarter. If Minnesota can get a turnover, they have a chance. I'm more inclined to believe that this game could potentially look to where Oregon jumps on them early. It's 14-0 in the first quarter. We get a Minnesota plus 39.5 live, and then maybe the Gophers get something where they can kind of keep it within shouting distance and not get embarrassed. So I'm going to look to play Minnesota live. If we get a 14-0 early start, I'm going to look at the Gophers at 39.5 or so live. But I would say, it's a conference game. They've got the look ahead spot to USC. If Minnesota shows up ready to go and they have exceptional execution, I'll give it a 7% chance that this is a one-score game in the fourth. 1 out of 13 games.
All right, let's go back to the injury report here. Georgia Southern's defensive injuries are mounting. 6 of their top 15 tacklers are listed as questionable headed in here on the injury report. I'm going to bang it again. I'm going to double down on Coastal Carolina money line. I brought it up earlier in the week. I don't think they're going to have an answer for Somali Collier. I think he's absolutely going to kill them with his legs, extending plays, extending drives on those third downs, those fourth downs, and being a red zone threat. I don't understand why they're favored in this game. Long term, Statesboro is a tough place to win. They got a lot of Gata pride, all that good stuff. This defense is horrific, and JC French is the kind of guy that can bail me out. If this is a close game, he can bail me out by throwing an interception, by putting the ball in harm's way. It's really just going to come down to, can Coastal Carolina's defense hold them under 175 yards rushing? Because they're not good in any of the metrics, but as long as they're not horrific in this game and situationally force French to make, let's call it 6 to 8 plays that define this game, where he has to be under pressure, behind the sticks in known passing situations. This kid has 29 turnover worthy plays in the last year and a half. He's one of the worst G5 quarterbacks in terms of putting the ball in harm's way, decision making, holding on to it too long, not being able to handle pressure from the pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and play against this wounded Georgia Southern team, fading them at home. Has anything changed for you from when we discussed it on Tuesday?
It hasn't, and let's call it what it is. We didn't think Coastal Carolina was very good early in the season. Their offense was atrocious. They have absolutely flipped the script after bringing in Collier at quarterback. This offense is electric. They score quickly. They accumulate explosive plays. They're fun to watch. And situationally, I think this is a good spot for the Chants. You look at Georgia Southern off of Deeper Than Hate, which is their huge rival with App, and they win that game on the road. It was a real uplifting win for that program. They didn't have a lot that really went right for Georgia Southern this season. And I mean, now you got to come back here and I don't know. I don't know. I look at Coastal Carolina. If they win this game, then they're hosting JMU to go to the conference championship game. And this is the spot where you put it all on the line here to get to that game. It's like getting to game 7 in a baseball series. It's like everyone's available. We just got to get it to game 7. Well, this is their game 6. If they win this game, then they'll be playing to go to the conference championship game hosting JMU in the last week of the season. And schematically, I think they will have success against Georgia Southern's defense. You can't bank on Georgia Southern's defense to accumulate stops at any rate. They don't stop the run. They're not good in their pass rush. There will be opportunities for Coastal Carolina to execute plays. They shouldn't be in third down very often. They should be able to move the football and accumulate 400, 450 yards, 4 or 5 red zone opportunities. This should be a spot where Coastal Carolina puts up a big number. If they can accumulate any stops on JC French, and the interesting thing too is Georgia Southern has been running the ball a lot more to take it out of JC French's hands. He hasn't looked like himself this whole season. He hasn't been as efficient as he was last year. I think we have something here with the shots on the money line.
All right, let's close out the injury discussion here, talking about Sam Houston. So the Bearcats are not going to have Watson in this game. I mentioned it earlier in the week. I was already on Delaware. This line has crossed over 10. I think this is going to get really ugly for the Sam Houston team. And that, I mean, they were so fortunate to get a win out in Corvallis. Now the pressure's off a little bit, that urgency to at least not get skunked on the season. But this Delaware team, some of these wins that they've put together already in the season, La Tech and UConn in particular, those are quality wins. They've shown that they're more than just a fun story becoming an FBS newcomer this year. And critically, they need this game to get to bowl eligibility. I understand that they're not eligible, but in the modern era, with the likelihood of there not being enough bowl eligible teams or teams opting out, we saw it last year with Marshall when all their players, opted out of the bowl game and there had to be a replacement team filling in. It Delaware wants to have that sixth win to be in a position to take advantage because it can mean so much to your program for lots of different reasons. If for no other, you get those 15 extra practices. That extra practice team allows you to develop depth going into the spring. Coaches talk about this all the time. Those fringe teams, those G5 teams, that can be a huge developmental edge over other teams in your same middle class of Conference USA or MAC or Mountain West conversation. Did I have the extra developmental time or did I not? So I think Delaware is going to absolutely lay it on Sam Houston in this game. And if it's Matauer who doesn't bring anything to the table as a runner, being the starting quarterback here, I think it's going to get ugly for a Sam Houston team that didn't even crack 200 total yards in a win last week against Oregon State. Do you like Delaware? I mean, I'd play them right up to the edge of 2 touchdowns at 13 and a half. That's my cutoff point. What are your thoughts on the Blue Hens here on the road?
Well, my thoughts are, damn it anyway, Sam Houston. What the heck was that? And Oregon State, it was stunning to see the game flip. I don't think I've ever seen a change in game momentum flip that drastic in a long time. Oregon State up 17-0, going into score to make it 24-0. They throw a pick. They just never recover. It was unreal. Sam Houston gets a fumble return for a touchdown. They get a punt return touchdown. It was just a wild game last week, a wild set of circumstances. This Sam Houston offense is not good, and they can't move the ball. They're not efficient. The Bearcats have 27 third down conversions all season. They're averaging 3 third down conversions per game. They're not successful in early downs. So they're punting a lot or going for it on fourth down and not converting a lot. This team is just not efficient. They don't do anything well. They don't pass protect well. Now with the backup quarterback, you really don't have the run element. Hunter Watson was such a gamer. He was a guy that would show up and get the job done. We saw it last season when they went 10-2. Well, a little bit different operation this year, and now with the backup, it's everything you said about Delaware is right. They're ineligible for postseason competition per the letter of the law, but we might have not enough 6-6 teams. We may not have a team that it wants to participate. It's stunning at this day and age that a team would say, "Nah, we're good. We don't want to go to a bowl." But that happens. We saw it last season, as you saw. Marshall couldn't field a team, but so 5-7 team swoops in. I think it is a good benchmark and a good barometer for Delaware to show up and say, "Hey, we had a winning season in our first year at FBS. We want to get to 7 wins, not just 6, but we want to get to 7. We want to have a winning season." And this is a shot for the Blue Hens to absolutely drop the hammer. I love Delaware this weekend. This could be the margin call. This could be one where they win by 3, 4 touchdowns and leave absolutely no doubt. And Sam Houston's defense is very porous. They'd be top 60 maybe in the FCS ranks. I think Delaware can put up 400 or 500 yards and score 45 points.
All right, I already mentioned NC State getting added to my card plus 15 and a half against Miami Hurricanes. Stuck. You have three that you want to mention, two from this week, and one that's going to be an early week action play. You want to go ahead and grab the best number. Let's actually start with that action one first. Ohio laying 28 and a half against UMass. Talk me through why you think now is the right time to go and grab that number.
Well, Ohio off the loss, there's some negative sentiment, but this team's going to show up at home. And I think when you look at a couple things, it's Ohio's last home game. It's Parker's last chance to show up and show out for the Bobs in his home stadium. He's not coming back next year. He came back this year. He's not coming back next year. Ohio's still mathematically alive. They really need to put up some impressive showings here in order to maybe manipulate some computer rankings, margin of victory, whatever else. UMass, we all kind of thought it would be Kent State this year, where their stat plot on the box and whisker chart was off the map. UMass's data point is really, really off the map. They are historically bad. Their offense can't generate anything. Even lining up against Ohio's less than average defense, UMass will not be able to generate any momentum offensively. They're going to be three and out a ton. And this defense to allow Northern Illinois, who hadn't scored more than 21 points all season, to just run the ball down their throat time and time again with no stopping it. And we saw Northern Illinois deploy the mobile quarterback who could make some things happen in the run game. Well, that's Parker. Parker Navarro is going to run all over this defense. And the early look ahead line for Ohio is 28 and a half. Should be 48 and a half. This is one where Ohio should score whenever they want. UMass is not going to put it together to do much here. Go grab Ohio early this week. I wanted to talk about it now because we won't get a chance before our next pod drops. But I like Ohio next week on Tuesday in Maction, minus 28 and a half, 29 and a half, whatever you can get.
All right, talk me through a Sun Belt total between South Alabama and UL Monroe, sitting at about 50 and a half out in the market. You still like it at any number north of 50 to go with the under.
Yeah, and I just don't see how they get to this total here with Louisiana Monroe, whose offense is really, really down this season. They just don't have a lot of weapons on the outside. Even with Armenta coming back from injury, they're not scoring a lot of points. They're not throwing the ball around. And South Alabama has looked a little better in recent weeks. I think when you look at this team, still inefficient offensively to be accounted for to score in the 30s. But this is a team that is they down on their luck. They haven't had a really good season. I think this is an opportunity, maybe the last opportunity for South Alabama to win a game this season. The defense has played a little bit better in recent weeks in Sun Belt play, and it's going to be a heavy dose of run. UL Monroe is going to run the ball two-thirds of the time. I don't think they're going to have a tremendous amount of success. Losers of five straight. I think this is just a slow burning, sloppy grinder between two bad teams that have nothing to play for. Maybe they rotate in some young guys and start that process of like, let's see what we've got for next year. Yeah, I like the under in this one. I don't think either one of these teams gets to 27.
Let's close it out in terms of your card with Pitt's head coach, Narduzzi. Man, do I hate this. I've spent really the last like 15 years trying to explain to casuals why the expansion of the playoff and all these different rules would kind of ruin college sports. We're there where the head coach of Pitt's like, it doesn't matter if we beat Notre Dame, a nationally ranked team, a regional power, all these great matchups over the year. It doesn't matter because then we can just control our destiny in the ACC. This essentially is an exhibition game. This is what college football had over pro football for generations, which was if you wanted to have a special season, you couldn't punt on games. You certainly couldn't punt on games against nationally ranked teams on national television with an opportunity to turn your season around and get a marquee win. But according to him, he doesn't give a shit about this game. So the fact of the matter is, you like the Irish in this spot. I don't see how you could take Pitt after seeing their coach, who's supposed to be this defensive minded, hard nosed guy, like, a real tough Midwestern blue collar kind of coach, to just say, like, yeah, we're basically punting on this game. It doesn't matter. Like, we're just on to the rest of our ACC schedule. Is there anything else schematically? Because there's plenty of advantages that the Irish have this year. I don't think enough has been made about how much of a jump this Notre Dame offense has made in terms of the passing game and how it's given them, all this versatility this year where you can't just focus in, you can't load the box, you can't hope to play some good situational football and get off the field on third down. This team's aggressive. This team has explosion. And when it comes to their backfield, whether it's Love or Price, like they can kill you with a single play. So how high would you go with this Irish team? I think it's in the market at 11 and a half right now. I feel like this could be a ladder situation. Do you agree?
I do, and I already have that logged. I mean, the play is the minus 10 and a half, minus 11 and a half, but I did take a few alts to margin call this one. I think this is a comment you cannot ignore. When he was asked point blank if this is a must win, he said absolutely not. And then Narduzzi goes on to say, if you haven't heard it at home, I don't care if we lose this game 100-0, as long as we win the next two. When your leader of your organization says, it doesn't matter this week, in any business, no matter what business you are in as an employee, if your boss says, yeah, you know what, guys, we've had a hell of a quarter, just take this week off. Yeah, we get what we get. Like the performance is going to drop a few notches no matter what you're doing. And I assure you, the urgency for Notre Dame is high. They are in must win. If they lose a game, they're out. And you, Notre Dame is so well oiled at this point in the season. Eighth in finishing drives, fifth in rush explosiveness on offense. They're going to be able to run the football in this one. Pittsburgh's defense, 132nd in explosiveness given up, 97th in finishing drives, and 118th against the rush. Pittsburgh has feasted off of some really bad ACC teams this season in recent weeks while generating their 5 game win streak. Florida State, Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, Stanford, not even in the same realm as Notre Dame. And when you look at Notre Dame and how their defense has performed, we have it etched in our mind, many people do, about them getting torched in the first half against Miami, about them getting shredded by Texas A&M in the second half. This defense stinks. They lost too much talent. There's just no way. But since that Purdue game, this defense has played absolute lights out football week in and week out. And Pittsburgh's quarterback, I have not been as impressed with Heinschel since the opening game that he came in. He's just looked a little bit jerky. It hasn't looked like a well-oiled operation for Pittsburgh. We still don't know if the running back is coming back to play. He's still listed as questionable. With what Narduzzi said in the presser, why rush him back here if the game doesn't matter? You still have some defensive guys that are out. They're getting a little bit healthier defensively, but Pittsburgh's team total is 21, 21 and a half. I don't see any way whatsoever that they get to that point total. And Notre Dame should be able to score whenever they want, 35, 42, 38. I think that this is a game where we've already seen Narduzzi tip his hand. At the first sign of it not going well, does he get the first platoon out of there because in his mind it doesn't matter? And I just don't understand how this team is going to practice. You play the game on Saturday how you practice all week. And I just don't know if this team is going to have prepared for going into battle and having to win the war as opposed to just yeah, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter this week. So I can't ignore that comment. I love Notre Dame this week. I'm not a guy who normally plays Notre Dame as a heavy favorite. I normally like to take the points the other way with Notre Dame games, but this is one where I think the Irish absolutely show up.
That'll do it for the weekend warm up under the Big Bets on Campus banner presented by DraftKings. Thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for BBOC. You're going to have access to all of our college football content, which is very soon going to be folding in college basketball content. We're going to have you covered all the way through into the summer for the College World Series. So, I mean, it's nonstop college action here. Why would you want to miss that? Hit the little bell button, subscribe, like, comment. It helps in terms of the algorithm, getting this out to more fans out there in the college universe. Thanks for listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. For Duck, I'm Mike Calabrese. We appreciate you so much. Everyone who came in and dropped in a question, thanks again, and we'll see you